Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session. And tonight is open mic night, which is your chance to send me any questions and try and stump the guru and see if I can help you to progress your property development journey. Now, in order to do this and enable me to do any preparation work for any questions that might come through, what I ask is you click on the link below and send your questions in advance. That allows me to do any prep work that I need to try and help you out. And these sessions go out on the first Sunday of every month, typically for our open mic night. So that said, we've got a ton of questions that have come through in the last little while. So let's go to see what has actually come through. So first question is from Benno, and Benno actually says he's got two questions. So let's see how we can actually help Benno out. So first question is, how should we handle a builder's EOT extension, so extension of time? And the second one is a question about the Toowoomba Council. So I might just answer the extension of time side of things. So firstly, mate, there's a couple of things that you want to do in preparation before you do any contract at all with regards to a building contract. Now, if you're doing a small scale project, so, you know, single house, couple of houses, duplex, that sort of thing, chances are you're going to be doing either a master builder or a HIA type contract. And if you're not doing those, if you're doing something like a six-pack of townhouses, that sort of thing, you're potentially doing a more commercial style contract, because those HIA and master builder contracts don't really work, I guess, as your projects start to scale. So with HIA and master builders, the first thing that you need to actually get right is the definition of what is your start date. If you don't have the definition of the start date correctly, then what time are you extending? Because when did it actually start? Now, as crazy as that sounds, the definition of the start date in both of those contracts is very convoluted, and it doesn't give a very clear, this is the date. So you want to get that right up front, okay? The next thing is, well, what are the reasons for an extension of time to actually occur? Now, most of those extensions of time where the controversy starts to come in is inclement weather type definitions. And again, the inclement weather definition is a little bit rubbery in both the HIA and master builders contract. So you want to update the inclement weather contract terms to actually be very clear and very specific in what is actually inclement weather. So for example, it might be if it's above 30 degrees temperature, for example. So there's no actual definition of that. It might be if it's over a certain amount of millimeters of rain, for example. Now, all it says is inclement weather. Now, if somebody says it's inclement weather, it's now a he said, she said type conversation with regards to the definition of that. So what I prefer to do is have a very, very clear definition of what that involves and how and where it's measured. So for example, if there is a certain amount of millimeters of rain, then when that actually occurs in the project is very different for different stages. So for example, if you're still building and digging the foundations, you know, 2 or 3 millimeters worth of rain is going to make everything muddy and slushy, and you've got to wait for it to dry before you can actually pour the foundations. And that a small amount of rain might actually impact you for multiple days. However, when you've got the roof on and all your tradies are inside doing fit out, then a lot of rain probably has very minimal impact on what they're actually doing. So you might have a graduated definition of what is a rain delay on site, for example, that says at different stages of the project, different amounts of rain will actually have different impacts on the site. So is it just the day it rained, or is it a knock-on effect for a couple of days afterwards, for example? Then the next one is, well, how do you prove that that actually occurred? Is it a rain gauge on site? In which case, how do you know that somebody's just not tipping their water bottle into that? Or alternatively, is that something that's measured officially at the Bureau of Meteorology or the nearest station near you, but then how far away is that station? So you want to get that all very cleared up right up front, because that's the most common request for an extension of time. Then there's the how long is it actually taking for that extension of time to actually be requested. In many instances, whatever the event is that is actually causing the extension of time, they need to actually make a claim within a certain period of time. So I modify the special conditions to say, if you think that if that inclement weather, for example, is causing a delay, you've got 7 days to tell me that actually caused a delay, and demonstrate to me through some sort of proof, some sort of evidence, being a photo, that sort of thing, that it actually did impact you. So show me a picture of nobody on site. Show me a picture of the rain, I guess, getting in the way of whatever it is that you're actually trying to do. Give me that evidence, and if you do that within 7 days, I'm happy to accept your extension of time. No problem at all. Okay, so then that's very clear. The last part of this to say, well, why are they needing an extension of time? And that's typically because there's a clause called liquidated damages. So liquidated damages says, well, if they're running late, what are the genuine costs to you as a developer that you're trying to overcome? Now, in trying to do that, it's not about you profiteering from the process, but rather covering actual costs. Now, the builder wants to minimize that as much as humanly possible. You want to maximize that as much as possible, but you're not allowed to profit from the experience. So, but what you can do is you can actually calculate the actual costs. So what interest are you actually paying for the property at the time? How much land tax, how much rates, those sorts of things. Actually calculate that out so you know what your holding costs are on a day-by-day basis, and actually factor that in, do a calculation of that, and actually put that calculation into the contract to actually say, this is how I've actually calculated what my liquidated damages should be to be the actual cost. Now, remember, at the point where the extension of time is happening, then chances are you're at peak debt at that point in time. So you need to account for the fact that you would be at peak debt when that extension starts to occur. So all of that in place, then what you want to have is a formal process that actually says, okay, we know exactly what to measure. We know exactly how to measure it. We know exactly what the proof point of that measurement is. We've got a timeline where they actually make the claim to demonstrate that that proof has actually occurred. And if they've done all that, they deserve the extension of time because it was a genuine impact on the project, and so they should be extended. If they don't, then then you would deny the claim based on valid reasons. And if they run past the date, then you've actually got a meaningful impact with regards to the liquidated damages. Now, be careful with liquidated damages because it's just a stick to beat the builder up, to avoid your holding costs. But equally, if you're going to give them a stick, why don't you consider giving them a carrot? Because if they finish early, then surely you're saving those same holding costs. So you might put if you're going to put a very high liquidated damages clause, you might have a bonus to offset that and say, well, if you finish a week early, then I'll give you a bonus for that being the actual costs. So now the builder is incentivized to actually finish early as opposed to just dragging it out. Now, if, for example, the builder has, multiple projects on at the same time, most builders do, and they've got their tradie that needs to go to 2 places at once, they are more likely to send it to you because they're going to get a bonus for that than they will to send to the other guy. So it means that your project's going to finish much faster. You're going to get lots of, you'll be able to turn your projects over much, much quicker. So consider all of that, Benno, hoping that helps, mate. Now, second question from Benno. He says, got a situation with Toowoomba Council charging exorbitant infrastructure charges. So infrastructure charges for those outside of Queensland are what you would call council contributions for an SDA or an NDIS housing. Any advice? Thank you very much. Mate, this one is a little tricky because it's very politically charged. So I'm going to be very careful in how I actually articulate this because I don't want to be putting any blame against any one particular council or anything like that, okay? So NDIS is the National Disability Scheme, so to try and help, disabled and disadvantaged people to actually get into the housing market and subsidised by the government, okay? Now, the solution to actually putting that together, if you're trying to put multiple people into that house at the same time, if you're trying to do that as independent living arrangements where you've got multiple cohabited units inside the one dwelling, then it sounds like Toowoomba Council are trying to charge you for each individual one. What you need to be able to demonstrate is, well, is it actually operating as one individual household or is it actually operating as multiple individual households? So that's probably the first part to that equation. Second part is find evidence of the fact that other councils aren't doing it, evidence of other developments in the area that haven't actually been charged those things. So that's another part to the process. and then have a word from a political perspective with your local member and say, isn't this meant to be like an affordable housing type arrangement? And why are we making it unaffordable to actually and disincentivize us from actually creating that? You know, that those sorts of conversations from a political perspective, and especially if that makes it into the media, are not good messaging to actually get out there. So you've got a couple of different approaches. Also go talk to your town planner, mate. They should have some insights into why this is. You want to understand why it's being charged in the first place. So if you can understand that, that's going to help massively with regards to trying to find the antidote to that. So anyway, hope that helps, Benno. Next question. Now that was a big mouthful. So next question comes from Nick. And his first question is, where do I start? He goes on to say, I'd like to be able to start finding deals to be able to sell to property developers using Development Sites Australia and our Development Site Deal Hub, okay? My goal is to gain the confidence to be able to start the mentoring program. So we run a mentoring program for those that weren't aware, and build the confidence to start developing, but I don't know where to start. Now, Nick, unfortunately, this is a little bit of a chicken and egg type situation, because unless you know what you're looking for, how is it that you know how to find a deal that other developers are also looking for? So you need to put some effort into your educational element in the first instance to actually have a good idea of what does and doesn't make a good deal. Now, there are really two fundamental elements that actually go into a deal. Okay, so when we're putting together a feasibility, it's your ability to analyze every single issue, challenge, and problem that's going to eventuate on a site. So your site analysis side of things. Be able to identify, for example, is there issues with electricity? Are there capacity issues with the stormwater? Are there, is there no fire hydrant out the front of the property? All those sorts of things. You need to identify every single one of those problems. And then you need to understand what is the right price that I should be paying for it, and what is the right price for the finished product being sold at the end of that. So if you can get those two right, then a feasibility is the adding and subtracting of those two things together. The challenge is that with limited experience, your site analysis is likely to overlook some challenges and problems because you just don't know what you're looking for. And so your feasibility is going to look great, but when you hand that over to the developer and they do their due diligence, they're going to see all the problems that you missed. They're going to potentially go, well, Nick, you didn't really know how to analyze this site. You're giving me these dud deals. They're going to start to not take you seriously, okay? So the first thing you want to do, make sure that you're turning up to our networking events, okay? We run our networking events in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide, okay? We run those every single month. Make sure you're turning up to those. We live stream them all the way around the country, so you can turn up to them no matter where you're geographically located. And we also have a back catalogue of all of those for the last 10 years, where they're all recorded, and copies of PowerPoint slides and all those sorts of things. So you can start to immerse yourself in other people's deals. We have real deals presented every single month. Understand the issues, challenges, and problems that actually happen in all of those. That's going to take some time to actually go and actually look at. And if you want to do that, if you want to go and look at that back catalogue, then why don't you consider our annual membership side of things? So it's $25 to turn up to an event. It's $250 to turn up to come to every event for the year and live stream into all of the others, plus look at the back catalogue. So look at the PDN annual membership. I've just put the link down there below to try and help you out. That's a great place to start before you do any 12-month mentoring program, and I'd love to talk to you about that as well separately. But before you do that, just immerse yourself in the kinds of issues and challenges that you need to actually, overcome. And then when you're doing that, now you're going to start to do a lot more, a lot more thorough job in actually putting that together. I guess when the time is right, we would absolutely love to have you, consider our property development formula education and mentoring program. Again, the link is down below for anyone who's interested in that, but not a sales pitch at all, mate. It's really just kind of giving you the insights into what it is that you would be covering. But the key, mate, is to put the effort into progressing yourself. Now, you might want to potentially shadow someone else, doing deals. You might want to do joint ventures with other people who are doing deals. You might consider our program. There's a lot of different ways that you want to do that to actually pick up some of the things in the where do I start. But the most the easiest one where to start, come to our networking events, mate. You're going to pick up so much from there. The masterminding concepts that you're actually going to get from there, talking about issues and challenges. You'll be able to bring sites to that little community and actually get them to talk about, hey, where do they see problems on the deal that you've actually got, before you go and embarrass yourself by giving that to someone who then says, hey, that deal's not really a deal. Okay, so that's where I would start. Come to our meetups. You're going to love it, mate, I promise. Okay, next question. So I hope that helps. Next question comes from Julie. Julie says, hey, Rob, I feel like I've been living under a rock. I've only just become aware yesterday about the upcoming changes to the National Construction Code. What dates do the changes apply, and what stage of approval will need to be at this date? Does it already apply to every different state? What are the implications? Thank you. Now, that's a massive question, Julie. It's an insanely massive question. So I'm going to start with the basics. Okay. So firstly, the National Construction Code. This is, as it sounds like, the building and construction industry standards that you have to actually build a house or houses or townhouses to make sure that it is fully compliant, that it's not going to fall over in the wind and all those sorts of things. Okay. So the National Construction Code gets updated on a regular basis. And there were some massive changes that came into the NCC late last year that they have slowly been pushing forward with regards to trying to roll out the date. Now, the date that it went live was the 1st of May, okay? Now, we're already past the 1st of May, so the National Construction Code is live right now with those changes, okay? Now, there are lots of different implications of that and different facets of that will roll out slightly differently in every single state, because each state building body has recognized that, look, the changes that are actually coming into play are relatively significant and will take a while to actually roll out. So some of the things that are going to be changing are fire safety, waterproofing, how there are falls to floor waste, where you put number of exits, plumbing restrictions, but probably one of the biggest changes that are actually coming is the implications with regards to livable housing. Okay, so livable housing is probably the most significant one. Plus, on top of that, there's also a whole bunch of environmental impacts, trying to make everything 6-star, 7-star. So 6-star energy rating, which is going to massively change how not just I guess how a house is made, but also the materials that it's actually made of. Potentially even, is it a north-south facing or is it east-west facing house? Those sorts of things will massively have impacts with regards to making this a 6-star energy rating type house. So some of those are rolling out at different stages in different states. My biggest guidance to you is to look up your local, construction authority. So that's going to change from state to state. So in Victoria, it's the VBA. In Western Australia, it's the I think it's the consumer area. In Queensland, it's Commerce WA, I should say. In Queensland, it's the Queensland Building QBCC. So it changes from state to state. You want to look up those guys and see how it is that they're rolling it out, what timelines they're rolling it out, what are the implications of that. Now, in all instances, there's going to be a graduated scheme as it actually goes out. So you've got a development approval in place that your council has said can be constructed. But when you go to construct it, the National Construction Code says, well, it's got to meet certain compliance requirements in order to do that. There are going to be instances where during this transition, what council has approved and the National Construction Code says is to how to build it, they will be in content and in conflict with each other, okay? So there's going to be a transition period where you're going to be able to get some of the old stuff, some of the old approvals built under the old codes and some of the new stuff built under the new codes. That's going to take a while to actually roll out until all of the brand new approvals post this National Construction Code date actually now comply with everything right up front, okay? So it's a graduated scheme, changes from state to state. The best place to find out, okay, I'm going to give you a link. The best place to find out is this link here. So National Construction Code changes. ABCB is the Australian Building Codes Board, I think they're called. So that That link is quite a complicated link, so I'm just going to leave that up for a little while. Go there. It's going to talk about what some of those changes are, and then from there, go to both the master builders and the HIA in your particular state to find out how the rollout of the different facets of that are actually going to be changing as you go. Okay, so that link is, I guess, well worth a read. Whilst I can't give you the actual date, like I know where you are, but I want to be very generic here because this is an Australia-wide broadcast. So I don't want to give a date that applies to you and not to everybody else. So just go and look up the link below and then go to your local building authority, look at how they're actually adopting that and rolling that out. And then also go look at your master builders and HIA. Most of them have actually got training courses that they're actually running. Some of those training courses are free and open to the general public. So very, very worthwhile to actually go and do that. So I hope that helps, Julie. Next question comes from Simran. Simran says, hi, Rob. I'm working with a JV partner, so joint venture partner, who will run the deal, and I am the money partner with no development experience. What are some of the things to look for in a JV agreement? Who decides the profit split, and at what point should I involve a solicitor? So Simran, fantastic questions. So let me kind of break this down into a couple of elements. So firstly, the whole point of a joint venture partnership is to make sure that the two parties are complementary to each other. So where one person is strong, the other person is weak, and where one person is the other person is strong, this one is weak. And so the two of you are going to work like that. So in this instance, they're strong in the skills experience, at least they're claiming to be, and you're going to be strong in the money experience. And so the two of those together are going to put together. The challenge is that because you have no development experience, you don't know whether the feasibility that this person is actually telling you is actually factually correct. Now, this comes back to the very point I was making for the very first question right at the start, where Nick was asking. So Nick asked, where do I start? You need to be the same. You need to be able to understand the issues, challenges, and problems that might occur on a project to see whether or not your site has those problems. Because I can guarantee you, with no disrespect to your JV partner, but everyone who's looking for a money partner, everyone is always going to present to you a feasibility that looks profitable. But unless you know how to assess whether or not that feasibility was put together correctly, whether they identify the issues and challenges, you are not going to be aware of whether or not there are some dormant problems that are hiding on the site that will eventually pop up when you are least expecting it. But they were always there right from the very, very start. So I'm going to give you some guidance to say the same thing that I gave to Nick before. Come to our meetups, start to learn, get the experience of people presenting their real deals, sit in the masterminding experience and actually talk to people about the projects that you're actually trying to look at and go, hey, is this actually a deal? Okay, so that's probably the first place to start. You also start to educate yourself in the process. If you want to consider our education mentoring programs, they are always there at any point in time. So do that. The biggest piece of advice I would say to anyone looking to be a money partner is if you don't understand the deal, then you're just taking someone's word for the fact that it's actually good. So you need to put enough, enough effort into the process to actually understand if the deal is really a deal. That's the first part. Second part is you need to understand whether or not your personalities are going to conflict with each other. How do they deal with conflict? How do they deal with stress? How do they deal with issues and challenges and problems? What's their experience in actually running deals? Those sorts of things. Now, everyone has to do deal number one. So I'm not saying don't do things with people who've never done a deal before, because lots of people try to do their first deal or trying to get money partners. But it's a matter of whether or not you believe that they've actually put the effort in to learn the skills to take that on as their first deal, okay? So do your homework on the person and do your homework on the deal itself. The last thing is, there were two other parts to your question. So the profit split arrangement, well, if you are 100% the money partner, and if they are 100% the sweat equity partner, and if the deal is an entry-level deal, then it's fairly typical to do a 50-50 profit split, okay? Fairly typical, okay? But as the deal size starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger, the effort to run the deal doesn't change a heck of a lot, but the money portion that goes into the deal does. So the money partner starts to take more and more risk, whereas the sweat equity partner is not taking more and more effort. So as the deal gets bigger and bigger and bigger, that profit split might actually change somewhat. So it might go 60-40 for I guess a medium-sized deal. It might go 70-30 for a very large deal, but it's 30% to the sweat equity partner of a much bigger deal. So they're still getting significant outcomes out of that process. Your last question was about when do you get a solicitor involved? The first thing you want to do, mate, is firstly understand, challenge all of the issues and challenges, look at their information memorandum, review the site, understand the issues and challenges yourself, come up with a heads of agreement. So heads of agreement are all the terms under which you and they want to deal with things. So how do you deal with conflict resolution? How do you deal with who's going to make the decisions in running a deal? How do you deal with cash flow situations? What happens if somebody gets sick in the middle of the project and can't actually finish it? What happens if somebody gets hit by a bus, dies, those sorts of things? How does that actually get finished? What happens if one person wants to keep stock, the other person doesn't? You want to understand all of those and actually document it out in human speak, in lay terms. Then take that heads of agreement document to the solicitor. Now, two things you can do with a solicitor. They can get a solicitor and you can get a solicitor, and those two solicitors are going to fight, okay? Because it's in the solicitor's best interest to find issues, challenges, and problems for their client. And of course, your guy is going to be over here and their guy is going to be over here. So there's going to be a massive gap in between. The alternative approach is you can go arm in arm, the two of you together, and go into the same solicitor and say, hey, we want you as the same solicitor to write a JV agreement that actually deals with everything we've covered in this heads of agreement and has a fair and equitable, measure against the two. So the stick that you beat them up with is the exact same stick that they beat you up with. Okay, so that everybody is fair. Now, if you're doing that, you won't get into the big haggles of the solicitors going back and forth, and it's going to be much more pleasant experience as you go. So hope that helps in the process, mate. Next question. Simran's got another question. Okay. Simran says, hi, Rob. What are some of the things to look for in a dual occupancy side-by-side site? Land size, frontage, nature strip, etc. What's the minimum size we can work with? Simran, that is a massive question. So firstly, I guess there are 537 councils in Australia, which means that for any development strategy, doesn't matter what it is, there are 537 different ways that every single council is going to interpret the exact same question that you actually have. So my encouragement to you is to specialize in one council, actually build yourself a cheat sheet about how that council actually operates to answer the exact same questions that you're talking about. So they will have all of their development codes online. They will have, what are the frontages? What are the nature? How wide does the nature strip need to be? What's the standard width driveway? All those sorts of things are actually going to be documented. Build yourself a cheat sheet that is specific to your council. And what you'll find is the council next door will have a different set of rules for the exact same thing. Okay, so when we say, what does that look like? It's different every single time. Now, that said, there are some, generic things that I could tell you as an indicator, but it is not an absolute. And I want to be very, very clear that it is not an absolute. So from a dual occupancy perspective, if you can do a side-by-side, then the width of the frontage will vary from council to council from anywhere from 12 metres all the way up to 20 metres from a frontage perspective, quite a wide range, okay? Typically, though, you're going to find it somewhere between 16 and 20 is fairly normal in order to do that. So remember, you're going to chop that in half, and one side's going to have half of it, and the other side's going to have the other half. So, if you're going much smaller than 16, it starts to become quite a narrow dwelling, which makes it hard to actually get a footprint. So that's the first part. Second part is, is it going to have to be a shared driveway or not a shared driveway? Are you going to have a body corporate on it or not? Can you actually strata title it, or can they be what they call Torrens title, which is on their own individual title? So there's a whole bunch of things that actually go into that. Some councils will allow all of it. Some councils will only allow some of it. So you need to understand how that works in your particular instance. But the way to get that is to go through your your council codes. Okay, so in each state, so for every state, with the exception of Queensland. The state government actually has copies of all of those codes for every single council. You can go to the one place. So go to the planning portal for your particular state. If you are in Queensland, then the planning portal is at a council level. So you'll need to go to the individual council that you're actually looking for, and all those development codes are sitting there. Now, in a lot of instances, I said to you, go build a cheat sheet. In a lot of instances, those councils have actually built the cheat sheet for you. Now, they won't call it a cheat sheet, but they might call it a guide. So you might have the dual occupancy guide. You might have the, I guess, the duplex guide, or they might call it standards. So do a little bit of creative Google searching and see what you can actually find on your particular council to see if they've put that together for you. Anyway, Simran, hope that helps. Next one, Nikki. Nikki says, do you know a company that provides the option to group together insurance policies for investment properties in different entities that will save money? Currently, I'm paying $1,400 in insurance for each property. Thought that should be able to group them together like large organizations do. Thank you in advance. Nikki, it's a fantastic question. The short answer is, do I know a company that does that? The answer is no, I don't. But I'm sure that they actually do exist. And I'll just kind of explain the question for everybody else who didn't quite pick it up. In this instance, Nikki has multiple properties that are in different entities. So maybe it's a couple of different trust names, maybe some's in a personal name, maybe something's in a company. But what she wants to do is group all of those together, take them as a package to her insurer and say, hey, what can you do? Now, what I would encourage you to do is find yourself an insurance broker. So just like you get a mortgage broker, you can get an insurance broker, and you can take the collection together to the insurance broker and say, hey, can you actually bundle this together and get me that group discount? Now, I can't guarantee that they're actually going to be able to do that. I don't know what threshold that actually starts to become important to. Is 2 properties enough? Probably not. Are 10 properties enough? Maybe. Somewhere in 5, could be challenging to actually get yourself through. But the person that you're going to be able to ask that to is an insurance broker. Now, given that most people don't take that kind of question to an insurance broker all the time, don't be discouraged if the first mortgage broker doesn't know what to do. I'd actually be reaching out to 2 or 3 of them and just make sure that you're getting fairly consistent advice out of all of them. Now, how they tend to operate, just so you understand under the scenes, they tend to have what they call an aggregator. So they would go to an aggregator who has relationships with a whole bunch of insurance providers under the covers. And so if one insurance provider is through one aggregator, if you go to the next insurance provider and they use the same aggregator, you're going to get pretty much the same answer. So there's half a dozen different aggregators out there. So one of the questions that you might ask is, who is your aggregator when you're actually making the initial phone calls? And so if you get different aggregators, you might actually get different insurance providers under the covers. And so you might find that you might get a different answer going down that approach. Anyway, Nikki, hope that helps you. Next question from Kevin. What do you think about 101 residential in WA? Will I be safe to deal with them? So firstly, 101 residential is a builder in Western Australia. Now I want to be very careful here that I don't know anything about this particular builder other than what I've Google searched on them. So this is in no way, shape or form a reflection on them as an organization. However, what I will say, Kevin, is how to do the research on any builder. Okay. So you want to find out firstly, what their building license number is. That's the first question that you want to do. Then you want to go to your local building authority, and in Western Australia, I believe that is, I'm trying to think their name, Commerce WA. So Commerce WA look after the building licenses in that state and actually do a search on their building license. Okay. Now each building licensing body in each state, it's always governed by the individual state, will actually keep different levels of records on every single one of those builders. So in doing that, what you should be able to find out is, are there any blemishes against that builder's name? Okay, so has somebody complained about issues and challenges before? were those issues and challenges actually resolved? Okay, so you should be able to say, here's a problem, it's been fixed, tick in the box. Okay, there's always going to be problems. I want to be very, very clear. Seeing a blemish on someone's record does not mean they're a bad builder. What it means is somebody had something go wrong and they resolved that. So, that could actually be a good sign. Now, if you see hundreds of those or thousands of complaints, that's a different matter altogether. But if you see an issue that has been resolved successfully, that's actually not necessarily a bad thing. Okay. Now, next one you want to look at is how big is their license. So in many instances, they're going to have the types of dwellings they're allowed to create. So can they just create houses? Can they create townhouses? Can they do 3-story, 5-story, 15-story? The size of the projects they're actually able to work on. The number of projects. So how many millions of dollars worth of construction work can they have under construction at any one point in time to make sure that they can actually manage their cash flow situations? Okay, so all of those things are really important. In some instances, that building authority is also going to say, these are the projects that person actually worked on. So it's going to give you a list of projects. You can actually go and drive past all of those and go, hey, I can actually see the build quality actually looks good. You can ask the builder for references. Now, chances are all of those references you'll be able to see on that list of deals that were actually done there. So absolutely categorically call those references. But now go ask the builder to say, can I have some references against the people you didn't list? Right? Ask for those phone numbers. Go and actually do that. Drive past some of their sites and have a look at some obvious things. So firstly, is there lots of activity on site? If there's lots of activity on site, then chances are they're paying their bills to their subbies. And so their subbies are happy. The subbies are going to keep turning up to do work. If nobody is there, then chances are cash flow is a little bit tight and the subbies might be happy to go work somewhere else where they're going to guarantee to get their cash flow. Have a look to see the cleanliness of a site. If they cannot keep a site clean, then they're not that organized. Maybe they're not that organized in other areas of their business too. So their cash flow, their project management side of things, a whole bunch of other things. So just simple thing like keeping your site clean is a really, really good clue to having all of that. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you actually, do a scope of works and get them to do an actual tender response. Take that out to multiple builders and make sure that the scope of works is identical and compare apples with apples. How do they rate against somebody else? Take their quote to a quantity surveyor and get the quantity surveyor to confirm whether or not they're undercharging or overcharging. Now, undercharging is as bad as overcharging. If they're undercharging, chances are they're going to come into cash flow problems a little bit later in the process, and that is going to cause issues. So you want to be super careful with how you do that. There was one other thing I was going to say, and I've completely forgotten what that is. But anyway, all of those are really good things to do for any builder at any point in time, okay? The last one I was going to say is see if you can get a letter from their accountant to actually say that they are trading successfully and that they have no, outstanding creditors, debtors or the like, and make sure that they're actually in a healthy cash flow position. So typically they're not going to give you a copy of their books. So you might try to ask that, but they won't necessarily reveal it. But they should be able to get a letter from their accountant to say, hey, everything's tickety-boo, and these guys are trading solvently and they don't foresee any issues or challenges along the way. Okay, so make sure all of those things are in place, and that's how you tell how any builder is good. That said, I don't know, the 101 residential brand at all. I can't speak to any of the works that they're actually doing from their website perspective. They look reputable. They look like that they're doing a ton of great work. But sometimes, and you've seen in the media, sometimes that is just a shell that sits in front and there's something hollow underneath. I don't know if that's the case with these guys at all. I'm not trying to make any inferences at all. But just because it looks nice and shiny up front doesn't necessarily mean anything under the covers. So doing all that work that I just told you about will then reveal what's happening behind the curtain. And when you know what's happening there, if the two of those align, giddy up. If the two of those don't align, then it gives you, a set of questions that allow you to go down a path of, questioning them as to whether or not where those issues and challenges might actually be. Anyway, hope that helps Kevin. So next one is from Benno. Benno says, how to best handle the extreme builders delays that we're seeing these days. Okay. And what are your views on why so many builders are actually going bust? Is there actually a solution? And please share my thoughts on what will happen with the building industry in the next year or two. Wow, you guys have given me some big questions today. So let me take a mouthful on that before I load up. Okay, so firstly, the extreme building delays. There's a combination of things that have actually led into this over the last 2 years. Most of those are starting to dissipate, and so firstly, we had COVID caused a whole bunch of problems in the logistics chain all the way around the globe. Okay, so simple things like, hey, the person that was cutting down the tree that ended up going into the building frame, that ended up going into into the mill, that went into the building frame, that went into the, I guess, the builder, etc., etc. The first step, chopping down the tree, COVID locked those people down, and so no trees were chopped down. So there was a delay there. Then the guy picking the tree up, putting it on the truck, COVID shut them down a little bit. Then went to the milling house, that closed down. So when you start to do that, it has this knock-on effect and the snowball effect down the food chain. And that, so I'm just talking one example here with being, I guess, the tree, but imagine that on all of the suppliers for everything. So all your porcelainware, all your kitchen cabinetry, all the lighting, all those sorts of things. So the supply chain was massively impacted, which then had a knock-on effect to say, well, by the time it actually got into a shipping container, the shipping container had all this backlog of stuff, and so the port was full of stuff that they couldn't actually get through. Then on top of that, there was the Suez Canal issue where a great big freighter ship got stuck in the middle of it, went sideways, and nobody could get past. So every single shipping container in and around Europe could no longer get through. So they couldn't get all the way over to the other side of the world because they couldn't get through the Suez Canal, which then meant there was no ships to actually move the stock, even though it happened in the Suez Canal over in Europe. It had implications all the way around the world. So, Australia, Japan, I guess all of Asia, that sort of thing, didn't have any ships turning up to then take the next lot of logistics out. So all of that started to happen, okay? Then we had local lockdowns and things like that. So all of that started to snowball, and that started to cause the delays. Then as we started to just get that just starting to move, because we started to have a recession, then all of a sudden the government started to print money and said, building bonus, building bonus, building bonus. And so everybody started to engage builders. And so all the builders' workloads went from not much at all to super high. Then because of that, there were labor shortages. So if you couldn't get your materials, you couldn't get the labor. That started to cause a whole bunch of things. And so as labor started to become challenging, then the subbies would say, well, if there's no materials over here, and this guy over here's got the materials and he's willing to pay a little bit more because I'm in more demand, I'm going to go do that. So then the prices of things started to go up from a labor perspective, and the prices of the materials went up because it was costing more to manufacture, less was actually being sold, more demand actually starting to happen. So everything started to ratchet, okay? So that happened over a slow 2-year period. That was massive in actually doing that. Now, that said, all the supply chain issues have somewhat dissipated, and we're back to almost normality with all of that backlog actually starting to happen. The building bonus has ended, and a lot of those builds that were started are now starting to come to completion. And now builders are twiddling their thumbs going, well, nobody's actually starting any projects anymore. And because everybody's worried about, hey, the cost of everything went up for the last 2 years, so everybody's sitting on their hands going, I don't want to get stuck in that, okay? Now, what I'm actually seeing in the real world is the cost of materials have started to come down. The cost of the labor has started to come down because that demand has not been there because nobody's commencing works. So I'm going to say it has stabilized somewhat. Now, so I don't see the cost escalations happening anymore. I don't see us retracting back to the prices that we had 2 years ago, but I do see that we have standardized in our price points, and we should be able to predict a little bit more because there was so much uncertainty in and around COVID with regards to will we be open, won't we? Will we, won't we? Who's going to be shut down? So one council shuts something down, the next one doesn't. Crazy things were actually happening in that time. So all of those days are over. We're learning to live with it and deal with it and that sort of thing. So we're back to normality. Now, why are builders going broke? Because fixed price contracts meant that with the cost of labor going up and the cost of materials going up, builders were trapped. They didn't have a choice. It was actually really tough times for builders. They were super busy. I can't remember the exact terminology that the media started to call it, but it's the profitless boom. So this profitless building boom where everybody was building, but nobody was actually making money. So a lot of builders got trapped with those fixed price contracts and had all of their profit margins started to get eroded, all of their costs started to get eroded, and a lot of people were just doing projects just to keep the cash flow happening because they were legally obligated to actually happen. So I think most of that is over. Okay. Now that said, 1 in 5 builders traditionally have always gone broke. So there's always issues and challenges that you need to manage from that perspective. That's everything that I said before with regards to how to determine is a builder a quality builder. That all applies. You want to make sure that you actually apply that in all instances. But is there a solution? No, Benno, there's not a solution. What it is vigilance. Be alert but not alarmed. Do all your homework. Do the research. Look up your builders' building license number. Do the research on them. Check their credit reference checks. Talk to their accountant. Make sure that they're actually in a cash flow positive situation. And if you do the things that I touched on earlier, where you start to give them rewards for finishing early, okay, then that builder is more likely to be more profitable and more incentivized to finish for you much, much earlier in the process. So those two things start to come together nicely. So I hope that helps, Benno. Jay says, if you're looking for money partners and find a good deal, what's the best way to secure the deal prior to finding the money partner so we can either on-sell or pull out and not lose our deposit? Oh, Jay, this is a tricky one, mate, because there are lots of legal challenges in each and every state with regards to what you can actually do here. Okay, so firstly, how are you finding money partners? There's some legal things that you need to be careful of, that you're not running what is called a managed investment scheme and actually trying to find partners. You're not allowed to go and just put posts on Facebook groups saying, hey, who wants to invest in my deal? Those sorts of things are not allowed, okay? So you want to be super careful in how you find your money partner. But when you found your money partner, you also want to be making sure that you actually control the deal. So you might put together an information memorandum to your investment partner that doesn't reveal the site address, for example, just to make sure that engage their interest, make sure that they're actually genuinely interested in the project or not, okay? Then the last part is, how do you secure the deal so nobody else actually go grabs it? Well, you want to secure that by getting it under contract, okay? It's not a word of mouth. It's not a handshake. It's nothing like that. You want to actually get it under contract, okay? Now, the different kinds of contracts will get, and the different special conditions that you put in there will give you the power to do the things that you're asking for, to on-sell or to pull out and not lose your actual deposit. So now, if you are on-selling, be super careful here. Chances are you are going to need to have a buyer's agent's license. Okay, now if you do not have a buyer's agent's license, you are not legally allowed to on-sell that because you have no agency agreement in order to do that. So you want to be super careful that you are able to do that. And that is one of the reasons why we actually created Development Sites Australia. So the link for Development Sites Australia is there. One of the reasons for that is we work as buyer's agents to actually be able to get that the finder's fee that you're actually looking for on your behalf legally, and then we give you a referral fee for actually introducing us for that. So we use our license agreement to actually do that. So you find the deal, we find the buyer to take on that deal, and we glue that together. Any buyer signs an agency agreement with us to actually say, yes, they're going to pay that agent's commission check. And then we share that agent's commission check with you. So Development Sites Australia, if you've not checked it out, it is fantastic. There's, at the moment, in the vicinity of about 400 deals on there. You can search by development strategy. You can search by the state that you're in, those sorts of things. You can get alerts sent to you on a regular basis to say what it is that you're actually looking for. And we curate all of the deals to make sure that they are indeed developable. We make no assertions as to whether or not they are profitable. That is on yourself to actually prove. But if you, I guess, would like to list on there, it is free to list. It is free to search, but there is a buyer's agency fee that is associated with anyone who actually takes that to contract. So we help you to protect that. We help you to put together an information memorandum, sorry, not an IM, but an information pack that does, I guess, a lot of the due diligence that people are actually looking for to do that. So do those sorts of things, mate. That will help to protect you as much as humanly possible. But I guess having it under contract is really the key to actually do that. Now, which kind of contract, well, that and how you on past that, that is very tricky, and that's going to change from state to state. And that's probably an hours long conversation to actually go into that all by itself. But if you talk to our team at Development Sites Australia, they'll happily walk you through with that. Okay, we've still got a bunch of questions to go, and we're fast approaching the hour mark. So I might get a couple more out of the way, and then we might have to pause the rest for next month. So Kumanan says, hi, Rob. I've got a property in Toowoomba. It's an existing 4-bedroom house sitting on 1,400 square meters, zoned as low medium density, which means townhouses are possible. Okay. I'm able to build 5 townhouses on the site, but in doing my suburb analysis research, there's not enough townhouses sold in the suburb for me to get a confident idea and gauge on the numbers. I know it's all about the data and all about the numbers. Is there a way to find out if the townhouse will sell and take the concept to an agent to see if there's any potential buyers? The existing house is rented for $520 per week. Kamanan, you've really touched on the antidote there. You need to actually talk to the agents in the area, not just one agent, but multiple agents, and understand, is there a demand for the property that you're actually, the product that you're actually trying to create? So there's 2 reasons why you will not have evidence of sales. 1, there is a lack of supply, and 2, there's a lack of demand. So you want to start to do the research on the demographics of the area and make sure that the demographics actually suit the kind of product that you're trying to propose. So there is no point at all trying to put together a product that's going to suit young people when the demographic suits old. Equally, the other way around, there's no point creating something that's going to suit old people when young people are actually living in the area. So those sorts of things, you want to make sure that the product type that you're actually trying to do actually has enough people in the area that would actually be interested in that. Then go to the agents and start to talk to them about, hey, if I brought this product to market, firstly, are you getting lots of people asking lots of questions about these sorts of things? And secondly, what do you think that product would sell for if it had this kind of configuration? So tell them the number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, number of car parks, that sort of thing, the quality spec that you're actually trying to put together. Give them some insights into that. Now, you might go talk to a valuer and see whether or not, I guess, they could give you an indication of the value of those things, okay? The other thing you can do is, while you've got no evidence in that suburb, what you could do is go to the surrounding suburbs and look for evidence there, and you're going to get, the one to the north, the one to the south, the one to the east, the one to the west, and you might be able to aggregate all of those together and say, look, it's probably going to be a blend of that in the middle somewhere. Now, that's a little rubbery in order to do that, but it's going to give you a little bit more insights and a little bit more confidence to get the numbers there that we're actually trying to look for. So hoping that kind of helps to give you some insights into how to do that. Now, the reason why you want lots of evidence is to try and minimize the risk. So the more evidence you've got, the more likely that you're going to be able to prove that the price point that you're actually looking for is actually able to be met. But if you can't, then the term is interpolate. We want to get a whole bunch of other data and interpret that and amalgamate that into form a more considered view and a wider view. But know that if you're going to do that, it is a little bit more speculative, is a little bit more rubbery, but it should give you a fairly good guide as to whether or not you're actually in the right ballpark in order to push ahead. Hope that helps, mate. Christine says, I hear a lot of examples where cash is needed for a property, purchase deposit, reno, JV, etc., and the money is pulled out of an existing property as a redraw or revaluation and withdraw equity. Can you give examples of this and how the figures work? Now, understanding it's not free money, it's actually a loan, and there were going to be loan repayments. So that means that loan repayments on the existing house are going to go up because of the increased amount of borrowings. Is that the case? Can you walk me through some examples of that? So, Christine, perfect question. So, firstly, there are a lot of people out there who are paper-based millionaires because they bought property many, many years ago, and the value of the property has actually gone up. The price point that they paid for the property was really, really low. And because of, I guess they've owned it for 10, 15, 20 years, they've actually paid off that loan in many instances. So they are asset rich, but cash flow poor, okay? So in that instance, because you've got a whole bunch of equity, you can do this in a couple of ways. You could refinance the property and potentially have that as a redraw facility, or alternatively as what is called a line of credit. Those two would basically have a loan facility that's actually sitting there, and you can pull the money out as if it's cash and then put it back in at any point in time. So you might be able to pull it out, run a project, and then you're paying interest on it while it's out, and then you put it back. Now, when you tend to do that, if you do that, there might be what is called a line fee. So line fee says, well, you've got the ability to borrow this, but you've not actually pulled the cash out. So we're going to charge you just a trickle feed cost back to the bank that basically says, well, you've reserved this money, so we can't give it to someone else, but we're going to incentivize you to make sure that you do use it by charging this line fee. Now, that line fee might be anywhere from 1% to 2.5% on the amount of funds that you want to borrow, okay? And then when you actually pull the cash out, then you'll have the genuine interest rate for what has actually been pulled out, okay? So that works just like liquid cash. You can pull it out, put it back in, and of course, there are going to be costs associated with that. Now, the purpose for which you pull the money out, okay, the intention of what you're trying to do, make sure you're actually capturing this in some way, shape, or form, and reporting that through to your accountant. But the intention for that determines whether or not that is tax-deductible debt, or whether or not it's non-tax deductible debt. So you want to make sure that if you're pulling it out, if you're putting a pool in your own backyard, that's clearly not tax deductible debt. But if you're doing that to purchase another property, for example, then you need to be able to demonstrate that cash went towards that, be able to, I guess, journal that through to your accountant to make sure they're accounted. And then the interest would actually be, I guess, deemed to be a cost towards the other project. Now, clearly, you're going to have to cash flow this in the short term in your own personal name, but then the project would potentially, when it returns the money, return some interest back to you. So you might want to have a loan document between yourself and yourself. So you, the human, and you, the development entity, you might have what is called an inter-entity loan to try and capture the fact that that money went out and that money was going to come back with an interest rate to offset exactly what you just touched on, that there are going to be costs associated with that. But the costs are then borne by the project. They're cash flowed by you, but the costs are borne by the project and impact the profitability of the project over and above you. So that's one way to actually do it. The other way to do it is, depending upon how advanced the project is, whether or not you can actually get it to the point of a development approval before you need to pull that cash out. You might go to a construction lender and they might say, look, we need some equity in the deal in order for us to fund the construction finance. And what they might allow you to do is just say, I'm going to allow you to put a mortgage against my house. So the first mortgage against my house to say, look, the equity is there. We don't need to pull it out. We just need to know that we've got access to it. Should the project go south, we might need to sell your house up. We just need to know that we've actually got control of that house, got our foot on the house. So in that instance, you're not actually borrowing the cash. You're just providing, I guess, a security mechanism to those people so that cash doesn't have an actual hard cost to you in those instances. So they're the two different ways to actually solve that, Christine. Hope that helps. Now, Arvin's got a question. Hey, Rob, you often talk about the kitchen table experience with 5 of your mates. Can you please share more details about this? What are your mates doing right now? And what are their achievements through the kitchen table experience? So happy to talk to that. So firstly, there's a book on my shelf back here. I don't know which one it is. It is called It's a book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich. Okay, now that book is about 120 years old, and Napoleon Hill followed a gentleman by the name of Andrew Carnegie around for 25 years. Now, Andrew Carnegie was one of the richest men on the planet. He was a billionaire 120 years ago as an iron and steel magnate. Now, in following Andrew Carnegie around, what he found is that the way that the rich do business and the way that us commoners do business is very, very different. As commoners, we tend to keep our problems to ourselves, and because of that, we can only solve our problem with our own worldly experience. But the way that the rich do it is they share their problem with their peers. Their peers have got more experience, and so they are able to effectively brainstorm that outcome. Now, the difference with a brainstorm is just an idea that gets generated by one person, okay? A mastermind is where one person gives you an outcome and the next person sees what they've done and amplifies that and says, well, based on what you're telling me, we can actually do something else as well. And then that starts to cascade to be the point where you're going to get an answer that no one individual would have actually come up with all by themselves. And yet you've got this fantastic answer that, I guess, was the combined effort of the entire mastermind. And that's the power of the mastermind, is to come up with the answers that nobody would have come up with all by themselves. Okay. So that is the experience. If you have not read that book, go get that book, read that book. It's still fantastic. Understand that it's 120 years old. And so some of the examples and the commentary is a little dated, but still very, very relevant, and the principles still apply. Now, that said, that kitchen table experience, those 5 mates, it was me and four others. We have done lots of different things. Now, one of them is super successful in their own right, way bigger than me, and doing some fantastic things. And because of that, they want to duck their head out of the limelight and don't really want to be known for that. Another one of those people chose that property development was not the career for them, and they have strategically withdrawn from that. One person does a couple of projects a year, and they're quite happy to just amble along. And the other person has decided that they want to become a money partner into deals rather than actually doing the work themselves. So we've all got different outcomes out of that experience, but and that's the beauty of this, is you actually work out what it is that you want to achieve that is unique and individual to you. So, but what I'm super proud of is the fact that as each mate invited a mate, and they invited another mate, that has become what is now the Property Developer Network, which is now very, very, very fast approaching 20,000 people. And we run our networking events in 4 states all the way around the country. So if anyone wants to come to one of those networking events, and I should have put this link up way earlier, if you want to come to those networking events, we run them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. Go to developernetwork.com.au/events, and you can actually come to those. And if they're $25 to come to an event, and if you love what we do, and I'm sure that you will love what you do, then why don't you consider doing an annual membership? And an annual membership is $250. What that allows you to do is not only turn up to the one in your local area, but also live stream into all the other ones around the country. So you can be turning up to these events every single month. Plus, we get a whole bunch of discounts and bonuses and all that sort of stuff, where you can look at the back catalog of every single recording of every presentation that we've ever done, every PowerPoint slide, etc. Plus, you get discounts to our discount suppliers. So lighting, flooring, tiling, electrical, those sorts of things, Bunnings, National Tiles, Wattle, and a whole bunch more. So very, very, very worthwhile to actually get on board with all of that. Now, I'm looking at what we've got. We've got one more question. I will close it out, even though we've gone well past the hour. And this is Kurum. So Kurum says, with escalating costs with building, plus the added risk with builders having a sustainable business, what can we do as developers to make more deals stack? For example, develop and hold strategy is getting harder to hold on to finished product upon completion due to the escalating interest rates, let alone trying to keep the products built around budgets and timelines. So Kuram, there's actually a lot of what I've already said already in today's presentation that is going to apply with regards to what due diligence you're actually going to do on your builder in the first place. Also, I guess what I've already spoken about with regards to the fact that building costs and escalations have stabilized and they're a lot more predictable now. So those sorts of things, I guess, I'll just say refer back to earlier in the presentation. Where it gets interesting is where you've said, the develop and hold strategy is getting harder to actually hold on to stock. I 1000% agree with that. But my philosophy on this is a little bit different. So now, firstly, I want to give you some context. I did 20 years of buy and hold upfront. So I was a long-term investor well before I became a developer. Okay. So I had that investor mindset and hold everything because it's super important to hold everything. Never sell. That was my mindset way back then. That has changed massively since becoming a property developer and actually understanding that debt costs, and it costs in a whole bunch of ways. It's not just, the pure cash that you actually outlay, but it's also opportunity costs, the ability to not be able to scale because your resources are trapped. You create these glass ceilings with regards to your borrowing capacity, and they stop you from actually going further. So in the early days, holding onto stock can actually be a massive handbrake or a massive anchor around your neck. Now, it's great if you're just an investor and you don't really want to actually have your money working super hard, then hold it. No problem at all. It'll work. It'll make money, but it'll just take a lot longer to actually do. But if you want to accelerate, if you want to actually start to move really fast, and I want you to encourage you to actually understand this metaphor that I'm actually going to talk about. Okay, so debt, I want you to treat like a balloon. Okay, now when you pull a balloon out of a packet, okay, it's flat. And what you want to do is you want to inflate the balloon with borrowing some money to actually go and purchase a property. And then when the project is finished, sell everything down in the early days. And what you have left over, the balloon is bigger than it was. It's a little bit fatter than it was. It's not as flat as it used to be. Now that is your profit. Okay. Now the next time you go to blow the balloon up, okay, because it's been pre-stretched, it actually grows bigger. Okay. And when it shrinks down, again, it is bigger. Again, more profit. Okay. Then it grows again, more profit. Now, if you can do this, you want to get to the point where the profit left over is actually big enough to actually own the stock outright. Now, if you can own the stock outright, that means that there is no interest rate implications. It means that you have 100% positive cash flow. And it means that, as inflation happens and those sorts of things, you're immune to all of that. So whereas if you had have held the stock, every time interest rates go up, it's going to hurt. It's going to impact your cash flow, that sort of thing. Now, if you have no debt on your property, then who cares about interest rates? Doesn't matter. Okay, they're just going to go skyrocket. So you can now hold a property forever and have it double every 7 to 10 years like every other one. You've got 100% positive cash flow, which means that you've got a whole bunch of equity coming in. You've got equity in the property, which means that you can use that, as we just touched on before, with regards to how do we pull the resources out, tap into the equity in that in order to borrow to do another project. And you've got that net cash flow, which means that you're one step closer to financial freedom. Now, in order to do that, there's a simple equation. All of us are aiming for a 20% profit on cost for our projects. And if we do that, there's a magic number of 6. Okay, the magic number of 6 means that if I do 6, if I sell 5, it will pay down the cost, which means I can keep 1 free and clear. So that's the concept. So all we have to do is go, well, how do I learn to do 6? Now, what we want to do is start with the end in mind. If I want to learn how to do 6 in order to keep 1, then I don't start by doing a 6-pack first go, because that's kind of risky and challenging and, a big step up for most people first go. But what if I did a smaller version of that? So what if I did 4? Okay. Well, I don't know how to do 4 yet either. So maybe I do a smaller version of that. I might do 2. So maybe it's a 1 into 2 subdivision. It might be a duplex, something like that. So in the process of, doing that first project, I do a 1 into 2. Well, it's actually not that big a step up to do 1 into 4. I've got most of the skills I can reapply. I've got a lot of lessons out of what I've just done. And so I'm incrementally scaling the size of my business. So I'll do a 1 into 2, then a 1 into 4, then a 1 into 6. Now I can keep 1. So within 3 projects, it's possible to actually have a 100% positive cash flow deal if, and I say if, you specialize in what it is that you are actually trying to do and get very, very good at that. Now, we teach a lot of that in our property development formula program. So again, I'll just kind of reference the fact that we actually have that, and we'll show you how to actually do that if anyone is of interest to that at all. But that's not a pitch. That's just kind of letting you know that actually sits there. But then what you want to do is map out that journey so you actually know, well, I'm going to start small, learn some skills, take a limited amount of risk, find evidence that other people have done it before, proof that those people were actually profitable, make sure there's still demand for what it is I'm actually looking for. So chances are I can actually profit from that with minimal risk. Okay, now you'll never eliminate risk, but what we're trying to do is minimize that risk as much as possible. Now, if you do that, now inflation actually becomes your friend. If you own it outright and inflation goes up, interest rates might go up, but the thing that happens with inflation is rents go up. So inflation is now your friend rather than your enemy. So you've noticed in the last 12 to 18 months, in many areas, rent has actually gone up anywhere from 15 to 30%. And that's all a result of inflation. So that's the kind of thing that you want to actually start to look for is, I guess, keeping your stock. And if you want to learn how, you know where to find us. Anyway, folks, we are well and truly past the hour. So I'm going to say thank you all very much for listening to me for this Sunday session. And if you want to submit a question for next month's Sunday session, we run these on the first Saturday of every month. If you want to do that, click on the link below, send it to propdev.info/open-mic. Submit your question early. That allows me to do the research that I need to do in order to help you on your property development journey. Till then, folks, I will see you at one of our upcoming meetups or on our next Sunday session. Bye for now.